Okay, welcome everyone to our third week. We're doing a little different format. Thank God I just returned last night, late at night, from the women's convention my wife attended in Crown Heights. And last night we were very blessed that my brother, my nephew from England got engaged, and the engagement party called a L'chaim was last night. It's a very special joy and simcha because this is the eldest son of my daughter, my sister, who passed away. She passed away at a very young age. He was a young boy. Thank God he's come to the point where he's going to build his own home. So, l'chaim to that. I'd like to thank Roger for sponsoring today's class. And without further ado, we're going to jump right in. So, I was thinking about what joke should I say. So, because of the nature of this class, as you'll see in the beginning, and because we just came off a Super Bowl, no matter who won, we are all winners here. The joke goes like this. There was a family who really wanted to go to the Super Bowl, and they made it. And they got really good seats, and they saved up money, and they're sitting right up front. And they're there in the pregame, and as things are starting to settle down, everyone takes seats, and the seats are full. This is the Super Bowl. You pay a lot of money for these seats. And the couple that's at the game sees in front of them a woman with an empty seat next to her. And, they say, these are expensive seats. Is anybody coming? She says, well, I bought these tickets almost a year ago. And unfortunately, since then, my husband passed on. So they say, oh, I'm really sorry to hear. Then they, start talking. And then they tell her, we say, wait 1 second here. So you should have invited some family. She said, well, they're at the funeral. All right. Terrible. It wasn't a good joke. Terrible joke. I have to say because it's Super Bowl. But as you will see, we will learn our first part of tonight's discussion is unfortunately also no good story. It's a terrible story. I think a lot of us are familiar with the blood libel. The Jews throughout the ages were accused of using Christian blood for matzah. And of course, that is coming up a holiday of Passover. But in all practical seriousness, this was a very difficult time for Jews throughout the ages. One of the last blood libels, in a certain sense, in a different format, some of these blood libels continue today, different accusations against Jews. But a formal blood libel was the story of Mendel Bayless at the turn of the century. And he actually made it to America. And according to some, passed away in this area and is buried somewhere in the state, but I think he passed away in Saratoga. Very, very world famous. The Rebbe's father was actually involved in that blood libel for the Jewish community. Anyhow, we're going to get to that in a moment. But let's establish what we did in the past 2 weeks in our journey of For the Ages from the Sages. We're very excited to hear from Fred, who's going to co-present a little later. But we looked at different case law in Jewish history. We're getting insight into what Jews went through. You're going to learn tonight about terrible, terrible things. And how Jews, whenever they were in most difficult situations, we highlighted in the first class the questions. Just the fact they were asking these questions tells you about what type of amazing people we are. We're talking about an Auschwitz. You just do what you got to do to survive. No, they want to hear, what does the Torah say? So we have something very to be proud of who we are. Our second class last week was, what is the first thing that a rabbi must do when he gets a halachic query? What is the first thing he must do? Anybody remember?
Mitzvah. No. Gather the facts.
Discovery. Gather the facts. If you don't know what the situation is, then you can't give any law that pertains to it. So we learned a lot of different cases. I'm not going to go through them. But the first job of a rabbi is to figure out what is the actual facts on the ground, boots on the ground. How does engineering work? How does this work? And if a rabbi is not capable of knowing that himself, he needs to go an expert in that field. We spoke about expert witnesses. That was a very interesting thing that Fred shared last week. So that's step one. This week is step two. And that is, Fred may share with you later, but if it's a straightforward case that it says about in the Torah, how to keep Shabbos, and it's really written right in, or in the code of Jewish law, there's no need for major response from a rabbi. It's when cases come up that have not yet been clarified, that is where the rabbi needs to use his artistic skills. So, in addition to being a scientist in terms of knowing what the law is, what the facts are, he needs to become creative to figure out what is a precedent that we can find in the Torah and the Talmud that will relate to this situation. So, we're going to have a lot of fun figuring out some very interesting cases. Remember, we spoke about an astrolabe? It's going to be very interesting. If you don't know what that is, I didn't either know. We'll find out. We'll watch a little video about it. We're going to look about as technology developed, electricity, how rabbis dealt with that with Shabbat candles and other things. I hope to do a lot of that. The first case takes a little while, but it's very interesting. So that is step 2. To be creative, we almost call it, maybe Pharaoh will talk more about precedent. Where do we find a similar? Now, sometimes these cases, as you'll see in the Talmud, almost seem nothing relevant to the case at hand, but this is where the art of the genius of the rabbi happens. We're going to see this together. So let me now share my screen, and you will be in the books with me as well.
You place a chameleon, right? Man of many hats.
Yes, it is. But there's more to the story today. So let's make sure we can see sound.
Saturday.
Okay. So let's get this rolling. If you can see, move closer this way. We're going to set it up today. Just like this. Okay. Captivating cases in Rabbinic Responsa, lesson 3, and its name is Precedent in Practice. We got to find how past rulings apply to new realities. So there'll be very interesting applications, different situations. I'm telling you, we're going to get to your questions, but we're going to keep it rolling. This concept of taking something not written clearly in the Torah and finding precedent for it and applying it to new situations is not something that is only a new age idea. Can anybody think of who was the first rabbi to use this precedent application law in Judaism? Can anybody guess?
Akiva.
Okay, that'd be good. No, prior to Rabbi Akiva.
Moses. Moshe.
My mom.
Correct. The very first rabbi gave the Torah to the Jews, Moshe.
That's
Now,
what
does
I said.
anybody know where Moshe does this? It's very interesting. It is relevant to the Torah readings we're going to be reading the next few weeks. That is famously.
Gathering the wood? No.
That would be good, but no. That is actually a related topic. It is the famous story of Moses breaking the tablets. Moses breaks the tablets when he finds that the Jews are serving idols, worshiping a golden calf, throws the tablets down.
What does that mean?
A lot of commentary on that, but the bottom line is God did not tell him directly to do it.
What does that mean?
So we're going to get to read this together. This is going to relate to text 1. But yes, comparative work, the genius of a rabbi starts with Moses. Join me on text 1, page 103. So this is the Talmud describing Moses using this application law. So here it goes. I'm going to do reading this just to make it a little simple. You know what? It's pretty simple. We're going to ask, Todd, can you read that?
Yes, I'm a simple guy. Okay.
Go for it.
If I had my glass, it'd be much easier. Let me put my glass. Hold on a second.
Okay, we're going to keep it rolling. So you're going to get a chance to do it.
I need my flashlight.
We're going to get you back, but we got to keep the ball rolling. So Tracy, you're going to do the first reading.
Reasoning did Moses apply to break the tablets? He said, I was explicitly told that an idol worshiper may not eat from the Paschal lamb, Exodus 12:43, which is only one of the 613 mitzvot. If so, now that Israel has worshipped the golden calf, they are certainly unworthy of receiving all 613 mitzvot.
Good. This is Talmud Shabbat. Let's just do the basic logic.
So
Moses was told by God in Egypt to bring a Paschal lamb. He said, however, if people worship idols, they are not meant to be doing the Paschal lamb. Moses says that's one mitzvah. And here we're giving the tablets to the Jews, the entirety of Torah, 613 mitzvahs. These people don't deserve it. He breaks the tablets. I want to say that there's a lot of commentary on this, especially the Rebbe has commentary on it, but this is a total valid Jewish approach in the Talmud. Moses applies a precedent that he was told directly from God to a new situation, right? But it's logical. Actually, we're not having the ability to go through all of 13 principles of how Judaism expounds Torah law, but one of them is called a kal v'chomer. If you have a situation that it's much more light and you still apply a rule, then in a case where it's all the more so, let's say it's called chomer, a stricter case, when you're trying to give not only one mitzvah to the Jews, but 6 and 13, if they're serving idols, they don't get it. Whether or not you love the reason, yes, Moses could have put away the tablets and have to break them. That is not part of today's discussion. But we see in the Talmud, and we're just going to show this on the screen, number one who worship idols doesn't deserve one mitzvah. So all the more so doesn't deserve all the mitzvah. That is the example. The first active rabbi used precedent in a new situation. He sees people serving idols, says, what do I do with these tablets? Well, God told me before that they should not do the past Pesach offering if they're serving idols. So certainly this is also just a logical thing. Okay, that's a deduction of Moses. So the first rabbi is the first one to do it. Now that you have that behind you, comparative work, creative, artistic elements to rabbis' lives, we're now going to go to a sad story. I'm going to try to show most of this in the video, okay? But I want to say one thing before we go on to our video. There is a verse in the Torah where God says, I approve Moses breaking the tablets. Immediately after he breaks it, God talks to Moses and he says, Yasher Koach. The word you've heard of someone does a mitzvah or something, he says Yasher Koach. It comes from that. So look at your screen. The actual word in the Torah is Asher Shibarta, and that is the same word as Yasher Koach. Thank you for breaking the tablet. So God was pleased with Moses' actions and his artistic, I'm getting rid of the artistic because I think we're getting confused, but his ability to apply precedent in new application.
And destroyed.
So that is our first background. Now, this story that's going to take place is a blood libel. It's a very delicate story. It's a terrible story.
I have a
And
question before you go on. I'm sorry.
Yes, please.
So is this basically saying that
I'm
because
listening.
that he broke the tablets because one of the commandments was broken? So he justified breaking
No,
the
he was told
tablets?
that idol worshippers.
Yeah, I know. So he
He
justified
saw that they're
breaking.
serving idols. He was told in Egypt that if they serve idols, they don't do Pesach. He said if they don't do Pesach, which is one mitzvah, here I'm about to give them the 613 mitzvah. Certainly they don't deserve it.
So he justified breaking the tablets because of that
They
thinking?
certainly didn't deserve it. You're asking a good question. Could have Moses hid them, waited them to do tshuva, give them another time? That is a great question. It's not part of the Talmud piece here. The Rebbe does discuss this, why he had to break them and couldn't just put them away. It's a good question, but not for now. Okay, so remind us afterwards. Maybe we'll touch on that. Here gets to the story of the blood libel. You've heard of Nuremberg. Everyone knows what Nuremberg is, right? Well, before the Nuremberg trials, there was a group of rabbis in Nuremberg who gathered to try to defend the Jewish community. And as you'll see, there's a difficult situation. There's a town called Renensburg, which is going to be a big part of this. But I want you to hear all the details of the story because it's very important to hear the entire story. This is a blood libel, but there's a different spin to it. Even though the local authority is against the Jews, they did it in a bad way, and the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire is actually against the local authority. It's going to be interesting, but you're going to see where the Jews are getting involved. Okay, so without further ado, your eyes to the screen.
In the spring of 1475, the city of Trent in northern Italy
I
became
don't see anything.
a tragedy. The body of 2-year-old Simon was found in a canal beneath the home of a Jewish family. Within days, all 18 Jewish men of the city were arrested. Under torture, they confessed to murdering the boy to use his blood in a Jewish ritual, an accusation with no basis in Jewish law or practice. All 18 were sentenced to death. The Jewish community of Trent was effectively erased. But the story didn't end there. A year later, in 1476, Bishop Heinrich of Regensburg passed through Trent on his way home from Rome. He learned that one of the tortured men had named Jews in Regensburg, accusing them of committing a similar crime nearly a decade earlier. Heinrich brought the confessions back to Regensburg. In the spring of 1476, the city arrested 17 of its most prominent Jews. Their families were placed under house arrest. Jewish assets across the city were frozen, and the torture began again. Some of the accused resisted, others broke under pressure. The resulting confessions were contradictory and confused. Dates didn't line up. Locations varied widely. Yet the authorities pressed on. They needed physical proof. So on April 22nd, 1476, the cellar of one of the accused was excavated. After 3 days, bones were discovered, said to be the remains of 4 children. But doubts quickly surfaced. Ronnie Hochashar, in The Myth of Ritual Murder, writes, according to a legal brief in defense of the 17 Jews and presented at the imperial court, the excavation was not supervised by disinterested parties. Soldiers and authorities were not called in until the 3rd day, and one soldier actually expressed his distrust of the workers entrusted with the digging. Some thought the bones had been planted to frame the Jews. Men were seen removing bones from the Christian cemetery. At the imperial court in Vienna, Emperor Frederick III ordered the Jews' release. Regensburg officials resisted, asserting their city's autonomy for criminal cases. A tense standoff dragged on until May 1478, when a compromise was reached. The prisoners would be freed, but only after paying an exorbitant sum, 10,000 florins to the emperor, 5,000 to the city for the trial and prison costs, 8,000 more to cover a fine the emperor had levied against the city for their disobedience in this case. In total, 23,000 florins, an impossible sum. Though Jews across the region gave generously, wasn't enough. The prisoners remained locked away. German rabbis convened in Nuremberg. Should they impose a tax on every Jewish community in the empire to free the Jews of Regensburg? How far could they go to buy justice?
Audio to be.
So I want to just explain the important detail of the case that's important to know. Basically, what happened was there was a blood libel in one city called Trent, which was successful for the government because they got Jews after torturing them to confess. So there was a bishop, going back from Rome. Trent is northern Italy. He hears, oh, there's a blood libel worked out in Trent. And that was the whole Jewish community. There was only 18 families. All of them confessed after torture. Listen, if you're not going to automatically get a proper trial, you can get tortured until you're going to confess. Who's not going to confess? And then once you confess, it's all true. So that was the problem for the Jewish people. So this bishop says, we're going to do it. He's from Regensburg. And he says, oh, this is the story. And they do another blood libel. The problem is they got the people to confess. But each confession, the guys were telling different stories. So when it came to the court, they were like, the emperor was like, this is what you guys came up with? Everything is confused. So the Roman emperor said, throw out the case and let the Jews free. But the people of Regensburg were going to look like real fools. They wouldn't they wouldn't let the Jews out. They said, well, we'll come up with a deal. Well, if you pay us enough money. Now, generally, the rule is, this is an important thing, and this was something we discussed in a previous course about hostages, that if it will incentivize further hostage taking, I'm not saying if the hostages are in danger of life and death, but for money, we do not do it. We had a special case of a rabbi who was taken hostage, and he said, "Do not ransom me," because it would just incentivize more. Again, these are countries that are ruled by the church, so there's nothing the Jews are at mercy. But in this case, it's a little different. Because if they don't rescue the Jews, what's going to happen? It's going to actually incentivize further blood libels, even if they're not great, because we'll anyways get the Jews to confess through torture. We'll get rid of the Jews. Here, it would actually, by coughing up enough money, they would at least be able to. Regensburg just wanted to be out of this because they would look like idiots. The city officials, the emperor was upset at them. They just wanted to pay back the emperor and solve this thing. So the Jews, the question isn't, are you allowed to, that's a separate thing. Are you allowed to pay money if it may incentivize hostage taking? This would not be the case. But it's one city. There are many cities around. The amount of money that's needed is so immense. We're talking about, if today's money, millions of dollars. And the Jewish community could not come up with it in Regensburg. So the rabbis in towns nearby said, maybe it's not the entire Jewish community all over the different towns of Germany, or really the Holy Roman Empire, to cough up this money. These 18 Jews got stuck. It's a sad story. But what do you mean? We're going to start pulling money from everywhere? That is the question that they had. They didn't know if it was right. If someone wanted to give charity, it's one thing, but to demand a tax from local fellow Jews, it was a big question. So they turned to a rabbi in Italy who was very famous. You may have heard the city Milan, Italy, that area, Rabbi Yosef Coulon. He is going to be the one that's going to address this question.
Okay.
We're going to be on page 107 in a moment. I'm skipping all the slides here because you guys got things. Can all Jews in the Holy Roman Empire be taxed to fund the release of the Jews of Regensburg? That is the question. This is where we spoke about the creativity. The rabbi who is going to field this question, the Jewish communities are turning to him. He's the leading rabbi of his time, halachic authority, and he goes ahead and cites a case that seems super unrelated to this, and it's very up Sam's alley. So Sam, you got to follow along with Roger on this. Before we read the Talmud inside, which is the source, we're going to look at two case studies. There's a hill. We're going to call it a mountain.
You want to read that? Because I can't see it.
I read what you need to know from the thing. And look in your book here, page 107. There's three communities, A, B, and C. A is on the top of the mountain, B is middle, and C is at the bottom of the mountain. Our first case is a river. The river, important, of course, everyone understands, the water is needed for all. And the river is flowing beautifully at A. At point B, it becomes stuck. Things have settled there, and eventually there's no water going down to B and C, because right by B, the water is being dammed up, not purposely, but it just happened. Settle, rocks got together, and the question is, who's got to fund the cleanup? So we have different options here. Let's look at exercise, the first exercise, which is really on page 107. Who's going to have to be responsible for the sediment removal? First option, you get to vote. All communities along the river, A, B, C. Only the ones downstream of the blockage, which is B and C, they're the ones affected by it, or only those upstream of the blockage, A. What do you guys vote?
A, because they made the mess.
You think that they made the mess. Now, it could be you're right, but a lot of times sediment just blocks up.
I see the only.
I mean, this looks like they're very close to each other, but these could be 100 miles away. Imagine the Hudson River is up here. I don't know, the people down in Kingston need some water. And near Kingston, it blocks up. They say, Albany, pay for it. Albany, well, nowadays, they'll always ask for Albany to pay for it. But they ask the community upstream to pay for it. You got to block it. You guys figure it out.
You know what, Rabbi, in all honesty, going back to your answer, I think that is, in reality, ideal.
I like your question.
Ideal. But unfortunately, what happens is that someone has to take responsibility.
So listen to this, what's interesting. If let's get back to the case. If we look at the sediment that's blocking it up and it's natural, then this case is exactly what it is. But remember our first class? You have to find out what's on the ground. Yeah, maybe. If it's all, soda bottles from upstream, maybe it is Albany's fault in that case, okay? But the point is that it's a natural blockage, and Albany says, I don't got anything to do with this. You guys figure it out.
Of course they do.
Now, B and C are suffering from it. So what is the vote? Who's going to have to pay for this?
Either A or C.
God will pay for it.
God
Sam has God's checkbook. He'll pay for it.
I see all three communities.
All three communities.
Yeah, it makes sense, all three.
Interesting. Okay. Why?
We're connected.
How far do you go up?
We're looking at the day.
Okay. Well, we're going to see now a little more. Now, that is case number 1.
That's without reason.
Now we have a similar case. Just imagine the same river is actually a drainage canal. So,
Okay, it's already been drained.
drainage canal. So, drainage canal that removes water from roads serves multiple communities on a hillside. The canal becomes clogged up, preventing water from draining. Who is responsible now for the cleaning of the blockage? So, we have a question again. Is it A, B, and C? That's option 1. Only those downhill below the blockage, which is C, or only those above it, which is A and B. What do you guys say?
All the communities that rely on this.
You say A?
Now, yeah.
Okay.
A, B, and C.
So here comes an interesting thing. It's to establish that B is also getting affected by it, Sam. Because there's a blockage,
Can I say one thing?
the drain is not going down, so it's all
Right.
flooding. You see
But
how it's flooding
Can I say one
B?
thing? It's interesting. In A, B, and C, they take responsibility even though they're not the one that caused it. That's the fascinating part of it.
Well, we don't know who caused it. We're right now even
A is
describing a natural phenomenon of
That's
settlement
responsible.
and building up. Well, someone has to clear the thing.
Wait a minute, who did it? Who created it in the first place?
Okay, so you have God creating it, which is
God-
great.
Yeah,
No, the
yeah.
drainage canal that removed,
Exactly,
stuff like
God.
built. Mankind.
No, the whole drainage canal was built, but sediment rose up, and now the
Right.
drain is not going down. It's just getting stuck and flooding
Based on-
B, and eventually it'll flood A as well.
That's based.
Okay, so now those who are suing God, you can take it to a different court. But this is dealt with in the Talmud, and we're going to get to see this inside. I will read this case, but here is the answer that we're reading in the Talmud. Look at the screen. Case A, sorry, the first case, right? Case 1, which is the river getting all dammed up and the water not flowing down to C. A, although the river starts there, it is not responsible for a blockage that was created by B. Not by B, but in the area of B, a blockage came up the river, B has to deal with it, and C has to contribute as well. Okay? Because they're also losing out from it, and they're gaining from removing the blockage. And basically it's reverse, same idea, just reverse in the case of the drainage system. Draining is going great in C in the case 2, right down here. The only thing that needs to happen is they don't have drain going on, and here it's flooding, and eventually it's going to flood A also. So they're obviously obligated to pay. So the checks, by the way, are the people that are non-responsible, and the exclamation points are those who have to pay. Now, if you have a federal government that controls all these cities, they can say that we take care of all this for everybody, and that's different. We're not talking about different towns running each other. Nonetheless, the Talmud says that town B and C in case 1 will contribute. A is not obligated. And in the second case, case 2, A and B are going to be obligated to take care of it because it's happening to them, and will eventually, if it's blocked in and starting to flood in B, it's eventually going to build up into
What if
A as
they don't
well.
contribute? One of those scenarios said didn't contribute.
So let us read. Oops, this is a little bit of the game.
Right.
Watch this. Text 4a on page 109. Says the Talmud, Amar Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda taught. So he's the sage who taught this teaching. Concerning the digging, well, you see how quickly, how shorthand the Talmud is. And me and you reading this law itself without the commentary 4b, which is Rashi's commentary, you'd be kind of lost. Look at this inside. Page 109, Rav Yehuda taught, concerning the digging of a river, the lower ones must assist the upper ones. Upper ones need not assist the lower ones. The reverse is true regarding a draining ditch or draining of rainwater. I'm not going to read the commentary Rashi because I just told it to you, but that is 4b. So this is a case that has nothing to do with blood libels. It's to do with communities working together. Who's responsible for repairs of things that are fitting for many communities? And what does the Talmud tell us? That even though at first glance, who is in danger is only B, but if it's inevitably going to happen to the others, like in the case 1, right? C is eventually going to lose water also. Or in case 2, if there's a drainage problem where it's not draining at B, eventually it will come to A as well. A has to contribute as well. So the Rabbi Yosef of Cologne, known as the Maharik, takes a case that's got nothing to do with blood libels and says the principle is going to give us precedent to how to deal with the situation. And he says, what do we see from the case of the drainage canal and the river? That if it is going to eventually happen to you, then even though right now it's not happening to you, you participate. And this is going to be very interesting because we're going to look at the history, and someone could debate this teaching. Well, maybe that won't spread the blood libels. We're going to see about what actually happened. So at first glance, who is in danger in the case of the blood libel? It's this community in Regensburg. Who's obligated to pay? The Regensburg community. However, my Rick's reasoning is Regensburg and other communities are going to be in danger eventually. Not only Regensburg, if they follow through, then it will become something, a community problem.
Well, let's put it this way, since, there are at least 3 communities that rely on that. I mean, it's their river too, they're responsible.
Also serving speed.
All right.
You see,
We're now, I think you're good. Does it make this very simple?
Yeah.
We got this.
What about?
So we are going now to see the actual reasoning of the rabbi for page 112, 5a. We're going to hear different people read it. Michelle, you read the first one on page 112, 5a.
Okay, it is well known and widely recognized that the imprisonment of our brethren from the holy community of Regensburg, may the rock protect and strengthen them, is an event that poses potential harm and danger not only to Regensburg and its surrounding areas, but to many other communities as well. The rabbis who have gathered at Nuremberg to save those wrongly sentenced to death emphasize this point in their letter to me.
So that is number 1. He's basically taking what we're going to see in a moment, the liberty, the art of taking a precedent in one case, and now it's not the exact same case. Will there blood libels certainly happen in another place? Maybe, maybe not. But as you'll see, he's going to address those points. Okay. Roger, you're going to read 5b. It's a little long, but you're going to see why he's going to deal with it.
Okay, and
In my humble opinion. Page 114.
in my humble opinion, any Jewish community that is reasonably at risk would almost certainly face the same fate, God forbid, if this matter is not properly addressed. These communities must take part in the financial burden. Saving the holy community of Regensburg ultimately means saving themselves as well, while the opposite outcome in Regensburg would bring dire consequences to them, heaven forbid. Even though at this moment the libel is directed only at Regensburg and not at other locations, still, because the calamity would inevitably spread to them as well, they are judged based on what is bound to occur, obligating them to contribute to the expenses of saving the holy community of Regensburg. May their rock protect and strengthen them. Evidence, in my opinion, can be found in the Talmud tractate Bava Meitzi, which obligates those living higher up to assist those below in repairing a drainage channel to direct water out of the city. The reasoning is that if the lower waters do not flow out, the upper waters will remain trapped in the higher areas. It is obvious that when water is blocked at the bottom of the channel, it does not immediately impact the higher portion of the channel. Rather, the water gradually rises until it affects the upper area. Nevertheless, because the damage will eventually reach the upper area, there is no distinction between earlier and later, and the people higher up are required to assist now. The same applies here. Even though the immediate harm and danger is currently befalling the holy community of Regensburg, it is well known that others are also at risk. Heaven forbid. They are therefore obligated to assist them, as I have explained.
So,
Like the church.
so I just want to say what's actually the key to this thing is we are going to now check out. You know what? Let's read this last piece, 5C. Fred, why don't you read 5C?
One might attempt to distinguish and argue that in the Talmudic case, the obligation for those higher up to assist is because the eventual damage to them is inevitable. However, here one might say that the spread of this false and slanderous accusation to other places is uncertain. But in truth, we see that sadly, there's a focused conspiracy to attack and incite against us. May God in his abundant mercy save us from their hands. In such a situation, the harm is considered to be certain. About such cases, it is said in Proverbs 28:14, praise is the person who is always vigilant.
Okay, so I want to just show you what appears on the next page. The story of the Talmud is it's a natural occurrence. The river needs to be cleaned. The drainage needs to be cleaned. It's just going to build up. The rabbi himself is saying, you could tell me, maybe the blood libels won't spread. He says, we know what's going on. That's why we have to have boots on the ground. He says, we know that there's been blood libels in this area and they constantly are occurring unless we put a stop to it. And look at this page, 117. Libels in the 1470s of the Holy Roman Empire. So there's a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 blood libels. Do you see that? You got to count them all. You can count from this side. You see the one in Trent. That was one that inspired the one in Regensburg. You see where the rabbis gather in Nuremberg.
Yeah.
Now, although the last date is Salzburg, really, the Regensburg one was completed afterwards. The people were in prison for years until they were able to gather such money was a very difficult task. So the bottom line is that after this one, no further blood libels for 2 decades. Under that emperor, no more blood libels. He felt that people were framing Jews. Until 1504 is the next blood libel. So in fact, this proved to be an incredible correct decision. Like we learned in the last class that whether or not this could be debated by other rabbis, but this rabbi saw what was going on. He said, if we put an end to this, this will end. People were worried, will this continue? And he said, well, we can figure this out now. So even though it's a very difficult task, we are going to solve the case in Regensburg. And otherwise, people will say, we can also make blood libels in our town and we'll get a lot of money from the Jews. People in Regensburg looked like fools, again, in the eyes of the emperor at the time. Okay, so we see here the art of taking a case that's totally irrelevant to a blood libel situation, but the principle using it, so that was the criteria of the rabbi to figure out what the Torah says in such a case.
So we can't talk about politics, but I realize that's what the rabbis right now are talking about when it comes to paying for releasing hostages.
Okay, so I want to say we did have a class on that. It's a little more complicated. There are nuanced approaches when it comes to it, but there is a halachic precedent for if it will incentivize further hostage taking, then there is precedent that we don't. Now here it's even more complicated because there's life and death involved and there's more elements, but yes, it does relate to that. We actually had a class on that last time. Okay. I'm going to be honest with you. The next case, I'm going to really skip through it. Not because it's not important, but I want to get to some.
Right.
Yes.
So did the blood libel stop after 1478? Is that what you're
That
saying?
era, yes, till 1504, till a new emperor came.
Oh,
As
okay.
long as this emperor, he had enough of these blood libels. It made the place look ridiculous. Because again, the way that they got the Jews to do it was torture them till these confessions came in. And in Regensburg, the confessions were so ludicrous that each one had a different story. It didn't look good for the court. So they said, we're dismissing this case. And the
Okay.
emperor was very upset that Regensburg framed up Jews. It looked terrible for him. He even, if you saw the video, he even told Regensburg they owe him a fine. But Regensburg wouldn't release the Jews until they got the money from the Jews to pay back the emperor. So that all, unfortunately, it's a sad story. We see how Talmud can be applied to different unique cases. The next case is to do with shul seating. In Spain, they took this very seriously. You know, I think almost all shuls today, sometimes on high holidays they sell seats, but generally every Jew is welcome in shul, certainly here at Chabad. But in Spain, people really bought their seats. And there's this whole little story.
What page?
I'm not going to read the whole case with you because it's interesting.
What
But in
page?
short,
What page?
it begins on page 119. I'm going to just show you through the screen. Basically, seats in shul were a certain price. Okay. This wealthy man says, now it was literally real estate seats. You could sell your seats. You can have your seats inherited. It was a real thing. You owned the seat. Almost imagine like you have a house, you can own it. You can own a condo. It's in a building. Yeah, but you can own it. You can sell it. You can inherit it. So these seats in shul were like that in Spain. It was a very formal Jewish community. And this guy said, listen, I've got money. And he bought out a whole bunch of seats. And now people need a seat in shul. And you got to come to him. He bought all these seats. And he can charge whatever rent he wants for these seats. He gave him a whole issue. So they wanted to add some seats in the shul. And the question, he started saying, well, till now, when I bought the seats, I paid this money for the seats. Everyone agreed that they rightfully were his. But he was being an idiot about it. We can have other good names. There's other words to describe this guy. But he made it, like that's what they do now with subletting, right? If someone like Airbnb, you know what I'm talking about. I buy all the Airbnbs and then I'm the one you're coming to for the Airbnb and then they could charge whatever. This is a thing. So they had to deal with this fellow in Spain. It's a little elaborate story, but the joke is, when you're on an airline, you want your leg room. And so they said, you know what? People need the seats in the shul. We'll add some more seats. And he said, no. When I bought these seats, I got the seats with the leg room. And he opposed. And the rabbi at the time had to find a unique example in the Talmud about real estate and to compare it to it. And that's figure 3.4 on page 121, called the right of way. And that's to do with Jewish real estate law. But what the rabbi suggested in this situation is text 8 and 122. So the rabbi is Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Sheshes, a famous rabbi called the Rivash, who lives in Spain in the 1300s. And he points to another piece of Talmud. So I'm just going to show you the slides here. The wealthy man buys his seats, and he has prices skyrocketing. People stop coming to shul. What are they going to do? The community said, we'll add more seats. The wealthy man says, I got my leg room. That's what I paid for. Are you allowed to? It was like real estate then, okay? So it sounds like a ridiculous story. It does sound pretty ridiculous. And this is what type of guy you're dealing with, but you have to figure out with the law.
Bad man, it's spraying out his convey.
Text 8 is the power of the people in the Talmud. It says like this: residents of a city may establish local standards for measurements, product pricing, and wages, and impose fines for non-compliance. So the rabbi says, use this piece of Talmud. You can cap seating. So this guy wants to sell seating so much. We can say that this is so you learn different things here. Minimum wage laws can be created by the community. Product pricing can be, according to Torah law, can be made by the community. And that's how they dealt with that situation. I don't want to spend too much more time on it.
More confused. Tell me more about community.
Text 8 tells us that the community has the ability to cap prices at different commodities, including synagogue seating. So this guy was still owned the seats. No one could take them away from him, but he couldn't sell them or rent them out at a certain price. So then his business was not worthwhile, basically.
Rabbi, how did the rabbis know where to go to find the precedent?
That is exactly the point. Sarah's asking a great question. How do you find these? So this is where the genius of the rabbis were, to find precedent in the Talmud of seemingly unrelated things. The Talmud doesn't talk about, there was no such thing as real estate seats in shul in the Talmud time. In Spain, the community kind of ended up like this. They made it very formal. So the rabbis this is the art. the art of the rabbis was to find principle and rules that apply in those situations from totally things that seemingly at first glance look totally different.
So they
I'm
have
excited to show you.
they have to keep reading and reading and reading. Or
Yes, that's
go?
right.
They don't do the. Is there like a table of contents somewhere that they?
Now, nowadays, there's a lot more of table of contents. Good question. But back in the day, not at all.
Oh, wow.
So here comes now what I'm very excited to learn with you about. Let's see how much time we have. Okay, we know one time. I'm going to show you a different video of the astrolabe. So this is talking about technology. And we're going to give some examples. You see on page 124, there's a whole bunch of examples. We're not going to go all of them together. I'm going to do some of the ones I feel are very, very interesting and relevant. We have more time. You can explore them yourselves. But what is the astrolabe? So I'm going to share another piece here. I need to actually go like this to it. Okay.
That's all. Okay. Got it.
Okay, we'll go back to it. What is an astrolabe? You're going to find out together with me. Okay. This is a shorter version. The lesson video that's in the PowerPoint is a little long. So we're going to go back to a good old...
has many uses.
Ooh,
Identifying stars
too
through finding
fast.
daily time. It may have been developed by the Greeks, but it reached its zenith in the hands of
Wait
Islamic scientists.
here.
They wanted to make better, more accurate instruments to calculate time.
This is an Islamic astrolabe. This instrument is actually a mechanical computer.
Here we go. We're starting all over again.
An astrolabe has many uses. Identifying stars to finding daily time. It may have been developed by the Greeks, but it reached its zenith in the hands of Islamic
Can I
scientists.
hear this?
They wanted to make better, more accurate instruments to calculate time.
Is there a visual? Or just...
This is
Oh, this thing not showing up then.
Yeah.
That's a problem. Okay, so we're going to redo this. Boy, I was very curious. It's quite impressive for what they knew at that time. Let me just get it up to place. Here it is. Okay. There we go. Okay. So now if we go back to our sharing our screen, everyone's going to have to see this nicely.
Okay.
How to calculate time?
And the meridian, showing midday and midnight.
I want to make sure. Sayil, tell us if you can hear it clearly.
An astrolabe has many uses, from identifying stars to finding daily time. It may have been developed by the Greeks, but it reached its zenith in the hands of Islamic scientists. They wanted to make better, more accurate instruments to calculate time.
This is an Islamic astrolabe. And this instrument is actually a mechanical computer. What you see here is the projection of the sky for a specific latitude. This is for Istanbul.
Etched on the base plate is the horizon line. Precise altitude circles marking the sun's height above the horizon, and the meridian showing midday and midnight. On top of the base plate is a movable plate showing stars and constellations, and a ring that represents the apparent movement of the sun throughout the year. It's labeled with dates.
It starts with one single observation. And we will actually try to maintain the position of this piece exactly aligning with the sun. I think it's now aligned. This is a perfect alignment, and we just read the altitude from here to here.
Yeah.
Is 54 degrees.
That means the sun is 54 degrees above the horizon. The user now turns the astrolabe over to find the 54-degree circle on the bottom plate. Next step, find and mark the date. It's etched on the ring that represents the sun's path. Then rotate the plate until the date aligns with the altitude mark. If you take a piece of string from the center of the astrolabe through the aligned points, you can read the time from the rim. The line is like the hand of a clock. It's 4 minutes past 2 in the afternoon.
Once we reach that, we can calculate any time. So that is not a simple to use instrument, but accurate enough for all timekeeping applications.
So this is pretty incredible science. This is over 600 years ago or more. As you see, the question is dealt with even more long ago in Jewish tradition. Look at page 124. So now that, let me just stop that share and go to our original document. Sam wants us to do a little more on the astrolabe. You'll have to do that a little bit later. But can you imagine they had the ability to figure out the exact time? This rabbi who's going to deal with it passes in 1310. I want to say that we're going to give a talk. I'm giving a talk, which is pretty cool, hosted by Siena Health Professions about Maimonides, who was an incredible doctor. We've studied so much of his teachings of Torah. I'm very excited about that. But what I do want to share is that at the time, the church did not embrace sciences. Most sciences and medicine was being developed by Islamic scientists, and Maimonides was studying under those people. In other words, the church did not embrace technology of the times and kept the people as ignorant as possible, generally speaking. In Judaism, we just...
What time is it?
Okay, we're skipping that.
If you glance at your iPhone, it's so simple to tell time. But I'd like to...
Okay, we're skipping that video. The bottom line is like this. What on earth does this have to do with Judaism? Well, to assemble one of these takes a little bit of work. And the question is, on Shabbat, one of the 39 works we don't do is to build something. Now, you're not building a home, you're putting something together, a little bit of a machine. Could you use this on Shabbat, or is this not Shabbat kosher? Let us join in on page 124 and see Rabbi Shlomo ben Adaris. We've actually had him as one of the most famous. Remember we discussed the first 7 books that were printed ever?
Yes.
And his was one of them, his Responsa. So can an astrolabe be used on Shabbat? Astrolabes dating back to antiquity were introduced to Christian Europe around the 13th century. So I guess it started off in Islam, and even now the Christian Europe is looking at it. Does assembling various parts of an astrolabe constitute the kind of building which prohibited on Shabbat? If it does, perhaps it should be permitted to use even when assembled, as it is will be inevitably lead to future assembly. So this is an interesting thing, and the rabbi needed to know, as we learned last week, how do you actually do it? How is it actually dealt with? Because you have to know how serious is the screwing in, as we're going to see. And so this is where, like last week, we learned you need to know the facts in the ground in order to establish a halachic rule. We're going to read that in a moment. I'm not going to do the hourglass. Let's do the next one, which is a printing press. So this is dealt with a rabbi in Galicia, Rabbi Binyamin. Roger, why don't you read the question?
Do printed Jewish books have the same sanctity as manuscripts?
So we know the Torah we cannot throw out. It is buried when it becomes invalid. We treat it with great respect. But now that the printing press comes, it's not written by hand. It's written by a printing press. Okay, someone moved a machine in the printing press, but it's maybe not imbued with the holiness of a Torah scroll if it's just a written book. That was the question. Take it up. Keep it going.
Several sacred manuscripts are accorded reverence. Nothing is placed atop them, and when no longer usable, they're buried rather than discarded. Do these laws apply exclusively to handwritten works, or do they extend equally to those produced by the printing press?
So this became a question when the printing press started printing Jewish books. Does anybody think they know the answer to that question?
Well,
I think it applies.
Yes, correct. The sanctity of Torah learning applies even if it's not handwritten, even if it is printed with a printing press or today with the technology of today, it still has the sanctity. We don't throw something out if it has holy text on it. I want to take this one because this is quite interesting. Firearms. Listen to this. How old is gunpowder?
Years old, 110 years old.
Look at this. Firearms. Rabbi Moshe Israelish. We're going to ask Tracy. Why don't you read this one?
A Jew accidentally shot his wagon driver while playing with his gun. What must he do to atone? Gunpowder weapons first appeared in Europe in the 14th century, the classic firearm emerging in the 15th century. Balaka distinguishes between accidents, those bordering on negligence, and those closer to unavoidable. Atonement measures vary depending on the category of the accident, prompting this question.
So what's interesting is, you see what year this is? The rabbi who issued this question is the Ashkenazic rabbi of the Code of Jewish Law, Rabbi Moshe Israelis, the Ramah. He passed in 1572, and they're already dealing with those type of questions. Let's go a little further to machinery. You're going to get a kick out of this, everyone.
Rabbi, what is Sheilot Oteshuvot? Is that the source of where they're getting it from?
Shiloh Teshuvot is the Hebrew word to say responsa. Machinery. Look at this. This is going to be very interesting. You guys see machinery? Is machine-made matzah kosher for Passover? Now, this takes us back to this rabbi lived an extremely long time, from 1785 to 1869. Rabbi Shlomo Kluger deals with machine-made matzah. When one makes matzah, one has to have intent that it is for a mitzvah. Can a machine have intent? Obviously not. But would it be sufficient that the one who maneuvers or starts moving the machine, intent, would that be sufficient? This really at the time was a great controversy about machines, because obviously machines don't have the human element, and you need someone's intention for to make the matzah proper. And the question is, machine may not have that. And really, actually, at his time, this was a major debated topic. So regardless of all the details involved in it, that is one. Now, me and Sam actually talked about the telegraph. How old is the telegraph, and wires and poles? And everyone knows it's to do with Arufs. Look at that. The same rabbi, Rabbi Shlomo Kluger, in the next one. And he actually ruled that yes, the poles and the wires used for the telegraph, the precursor of the precursor of the telephone, would be sufficient for Aruf. So I'm just showing you some. Let's do one more. We'll do two more. Electricity. Michelle, you read electricity.
Okay, can electric lights be used for Shabbat candles? Is turning them off on Shabbat permitted? The incandescent light bulb was developed by Edison and Swan in 1879. Torah, Exodus 35:3 prohibits kindling fire on Shabbat. To ensure that homes will remain illuminated in honor of the day, the sages instituted the mitzvah of kindling lights before Shabbat, along with a special blessing. The introduction of electric lights raised numerous questions. Among them, is use of electricity on Shabbat prohibited, and can the rabbinic obligation to kindle Shabbat lights be fulfilled using electric lamps?
So this is a question that arises once electricity is available. Believe it or not, this is not in the United States. It's Lvov. You see that, Lviv? That is Ukraine. That is just being dealt with. And sure enough, for making Shabbat candles, and this happens, by the way, when someone's in the hospital, you cannot use real flames. It is sufficient to use electric candles, even to make a blessing on, as long as it's done before Shabbat. And this is it real fire or not? All those type of questions. And therefore, it's also not allowed to be turned off on Shabbat. Okay. So you got some of that. We're going to now, we started off our last one is about the hot air balloon. We're gonna find out that's and the astrolabe. So let us begin. Just establishing the question about the hot air balloon. Sam, you're gonna read the hot air balloon case.
Does a hot air balloon hovering over a sukkah invalidate it? The first hot air balloon was launched in 1783. Steerable balloons with internal combustion engines were developed by 1898. The validity of a sukkah requires no obstruction between the
Spot.
roof covering and the open sky. This raises the question of whether a hot air balloon hovering over a sukkah would invalidate.
The interesting thing about this question is that the rabbi who we're going to see didn't actually happen, but once they started hearing about, this is before planes. This is the first time you think of an object, a big object. Now, everyone understands that the sukkah is meant to protect you from the rain, but it can't be. If you had an awning, big awning, and then a sukkah under it, no, it's not under the sky. It needs to be directly in the sky. Even a tree that's rooted in the ground, if you build a sukkah and say, "Oh, well, we got branches, but they're really up high," it needs to be directly under the sky. So now I have this rabbi actually. I want to know if anybody can connect this to a previous thing we learned in the class. It wasn't actually a practical question. He was wondering, this rabbi, once he heard about hot air balloons. Now, technology of today is much further advanced, but you're seeing how as technology progressed, they had to deal with electricity and Shabbat, hot air balloons and sukkahs. So they're trying to figure out all these different things. Let us now, because I do want to give time. Yes.
Clouds cover.
I love Sam's question. Waiting. So that's a great question. So that is considered the sky. That is considered the sky, Sam. Oh, great. Astrolabe. Again, amazing. But isn't that science amazing that they had that in those days? They could almost know exactly, based on the degrees of the sun, they could know. And this is.
But wait, I thought it was all assembled.
So no, you'll see that there's assembly pieces. There's two plates.
Where are we going?
But why did you put it together on Shabbat? You put it together before Shabbat.
Good question. So that's going to be part of this. Let's say someone just got in the package. Oh, I'm going to now assemble it.
Well, that's making something.
Okay, good.
On Shabbos, you're
going to find out, Sam. I'm not going to give this away. Let Sam find out. Okay, text 9. The first language in text 9, page 131, is an area where this question is coming from. It's probably an area in southern France, near the Spanish border. The rabbis in Spain. Again, this is one of the most important rabbis of his time, the Rajba, Rabbi Shlomo ben Adaris. Regarding your question, so it's to this fellow from southern France. Is it permitted to use an astrolabe on Shabbat? So he goes, as Sarah's, he says, well, let's talk about building. If you are not building something that's very tightly secured, is that considered a building or not? And the Talmud talks about a sectional bed. Text 10, due to time, and I want to give Fred some time, I'm going to continue on. In the house of Rav Chama, that's the sage's name, there was a sectional bed, which they would reassemble on the festival. So they had a small bed, and the guests come, the big holidays, they pull out the bed and they attach it. Shabbos, can we build this as a building, or are we just like pushing it together? That's really the question. To take on a hammer and nail, that would not be Shabbat kosher. But they're just, putting together some pieces. So listen to what it says in the Talmud. One of the sages said to him, what is your reasoning to permit it? He would do this on the festivals. There's someone else here for Shabbos. We'll make him a bed. Put it together. Like today, you throw out a little futon or something. But in those days, they're putting together some type of structure for, I guess, some mattress of some sort. He replied, I agree with the opinion of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, so that if it is a loose fitting, it is permitted. Therefore, the rabbi also, the Rajba said the astrolabe is not a very tight fitting, and he had to learn and see an astrolabe. How was it done? And there's a little needle that holds them together, and it's not a very strong. It's easy to assemble. And Sam's asking a good question. I don't know why. It seems very small. It doesn't seem like something that you would really want to assemble and disassemble so many times. I guess maybe after time it had to be a certain, the plates have to be aligned in a certain way, the stars, right? So maybe you have to, as the seasons went on, you would have to move it a bit. because the stars, the constellations are moving. So you may have to. So they had like a loose kind of screw that you can loosen up and then turn the plate. The Rajbut saw it. He said, "I got my boots in the ground. I know what this is. This is not building on Shabbat. You can use this. You can tell your time in it. You can build it and assemble it on Shabbat." Our last case is the hot air balloon. It's amazing. Everyone knows here, right? What was the first hot air balloons used for? Spying, war. And that's the kind of the mother of all invention is necessity. So that's a little good and bad mixed bag. Bottom line is that most of the technology we have today starts off always in the military, GPS and all that other stuff. The story takes us to the city of Lodz, the day before Sukkot, 1908. And the rabbi's name is Rabbi Moshe Perlmutter. There's a Dr. Perlmutter in Albany, an eye doctor. Anyhow. So he is wondering about, he hears, there's these flying balloons and he's hearing about all this stuff. What if it would go over my sukkah? It was right before Sukkot. He was thinking about sukkahs. So what's interesting is this is not a practical question, it's a hypothetical question. Who remembers, based on previous classes, where do we have greater divine assistance in our making a halachic ruling, when it's a hypothetical or when it's a practical case? Practical, yes. So here comes, very good. So here comes text 11. We're going to give this, Todd, are you able to read them? Giving you, if the answer is yes or no. Good.
Okay,
You're going to read right here. A question.
okay, a question came to me regarding a woman.
No, I think you're on the wrong. You're on the wrong page. Previous class. Remember page 133. Fred, you're going to get to read this case.
33.
Yeah, new matter.
Our teacher?
Yes.
Our teacher, Rabbi Shalom Mordechai HaKohen, chief judge of the community of Bershevne, live and be well. I was struck by a new matter that has never arisen before. Inventors have recently brought into reality the ability to soar in a hot air balloon. Humans control it, so that if they want to remain stationary at a high altitude, they can do so, remaining there even when there are strong winds. The hot air balloon is large in both length and width. What is the halachic status of a sukkah if a hot air balloon is seen hovering above the sukkah? Might it render the sukkah invalid?
So as you see, this was not a practical thing. He just, right before Sukkot, he's thinking, there's these new hot air balloons. How's this going to affect our sukkah if it came on top? So it's a hypothetical question. He points to a Mishnah, which is the predecessor to the Talmud in text 12, which basically says that to be a separation, there has to be some way that it's anchored on earth. Okay? And it's even talking about deep sea diving. So basically, let's say a ship is, I'm not going to explain why it's relevant. It's relevant for laws of purity and impurity, but it's not for today. If a ship is passing someone over, either scuba diving or swimming and doing a little mikvah dip, and a ship passes over them, if it is not anchored, even though it's right now stationary, but it could move, that is not considered a permanent covering. But if, let's say, the ship is anchored until it is unanchored, it is. The hot air balloon, although they can steer it and kind of hover over your sukkah if they really want to give you a hard time, even if they would do, that would not invalidate your sukkah because it is not anchored to the ground. Now, if you have a large tent which is anchored to the ground above your sukkah, yes, that is, even though it's flapping in the wind and it's getting, it's not so tightly done. If it has some anchoring to the ground, that can be considered halachically a little bit of a separation. So we're now going to go, I think, to our key point video, and we're skipping all these wonderful little things. We are now ready for our key point video. Then Fred, I'm going to actually just turn the screen to you so that everyone can see. I want to mention one thing. what we see, and this is very, very important, and this is the last thing on the screen. We have Torah law, precedent, and then the human mind, these rabbis giving unique ways, artistically, figuring out how this applies to this in this case. We're learning about a blood libel, find about rivers in different communities. We're learning about a astrolabe, learn about the portable bed of Rabbi Chama that he used to pull out on holidays. Okay, this is a unique part of Torah because this is really where heaven and earth connect. God gave us Torah from heaven. It's God's word, and then we have to use our minds to make the right application, and that is really a key element to this. So without further ado, we're going to now go to our final video, and we are going to continue with Fred at the end.
Lesson 3. Precedent in practice. 1. Moses' decision to break the tablets was an act of halachic reasoning by analogy, and God affirmed his conclusion. This set a precedent for rabbinic decision-making. Rabbis applying existing Torah principles when facing new questions and winning divine approval. 2. Whether it was Rabbi Yosef Kalon's bold ruling obligating all communities to help free the Regensburg prisoners, or Rabbi Yitzhak Bar Sheshet's nuanced handling of the synagogue sin shortage in Shetiva, the Responsa literature shows how rabbis applied existing Talmudic law to unique and unexpected situations. 3. Halachic rulings don't exist in a vacuum. Rabbi Yosef Kalon's decision wasn't just a legal interpretation. It was informed by a sharp reading of the anti-Semitic climate of his time. 4. Judaism sees human innovation as part of the divine plan, meant to be harnessed for goodness and holiness. But the emergence of the new, from the astrolabe during the Middle Ages to the hot air balloon in modern times, often raises new halachic questions. Rabbis have historically met these advances with a commitment to applying timeless principles to modern developments. 5. When we apply Torah law to new realities, we forge a sacred and profound bond between the human mind and God's will. 6. Every Jew is called upon to apply the Torah to new realities. While practical rulings are reserved for qualified experts, engaging in this process in a conceptual manner deepens our relationship with the Torah and with God.
Okay, next week, we have a class still on Tuesday. It's going to be an amazing class called Counterweights Considered. The push and pull within the halachic decisions. We're going to explore that next week. We're about to hear from Fred. I want to say one thing. I am going to read you text 14, page 138, because this is something that I, as a rabbi, versed in some of law. Most of these decisions you're seeing are expert rabbis that spend their time mostly studying and delving for hours and hours. And then I do some of that, but not on all areas. And even most rabbis called the Rav, are experts in specific areas, and they'll refer you to someone else if they're not an expert in that field, if they're a proper rabbi. But what's interesting is that text 14 is what the video ended with, is that the Tanya tells us that each of us should reveal our own insights in Torah. Maybe we cannot render authoritative legal rulings, but to delve and find innovation, application of principles. And I actually personally really love this, something the Rebbe said we should do. And I always do a deep research and analysis of things that I find interesting and fascinating and relevant. My most recent one was a discussion about why did God tell Moses to take a 3-day trip out of Egypt. Some of you read that article. I wrote it also in English. But each of us should be trying to make our own innovation, connecting the human mind, our minds, God's gift to us, with the Torah. So please join me in text 14. Every one of us can reveal secrets of wisdom, to reveal and to innovate new insights in halacha, agadah, the revealed dimensions of the Torah and the Kabbalistic sphere. Indeed, we're all obliged to do so to perfect our souls. So this is something for everyone. Without further ado, Fred, we're going to turn the screen to you. I'm going to stop the share. And Fred, we're going to hear your input on this. We're going to listen to Fred give his analysis.
Well, good evening again for class number 3. And we've seen in 1, 2, and now 3, the identifiable thread of legal analysis as it began in the most early rabbinical times, and how we can see the seeds that bring it all together up to contemporary secular law. Now, this lesson talked about cases of first impression. Earlier, we learned that rabbis initially in their problem-solving procedure would first start with discovering the facts, what we call discovery. And then they would look toward precedent, established law or rulings that existed upon which they could apply to the facts and determine an answer. But tonight, we're saying, what if a rabbi is faced with a case of first impression? He gathers the facts, but there is no precedent upon which he can rely. He has to search for it and find it, and maybe be a little clever. Well, the first example in today's text was Moses, first rabbi. And what did he do when he had to make a decision, when he returned with the tablets and found that the people in his absence engaged in idol worship? There was no precedent. God didn't tell him what to do, but he hurled the tablets to the ground and he broke them. Why? Because that was the very, very first example of where he used analogy to figure out what to do. And the analogy was that if the people could not receive the 613 mitzvot in the Torah, they were not entitled to receive mitzvah, and therefore they should be broken. So that was the very first time Moses, not knowing what to do, he had no precedent to rely upon, but in his wisdom, to make the point dramatically to the people, he broke the tablets to show that to them. Now, that case of first impression and how Moses dealt with it, we can look in today's, in the back of the books, we're reading the front part, but in the back there are the legal cases that the author has cited. And what does it say about how today in modern secular law, the courts and the judges go about making a determination in the case of first impression? It's, if anyone wants to follow me, I'm on page 278. The courts must consider relevant state precedents, analogous decisions, consider dicta, in other words, what have people said in cases, scholarly works, and any other reliable data tending to convincingly show how to decide the issue at hand. Moses had very little. He only knew that the mitzvot could not be given to the people if they worshiped idols. That was a wise decision. He had very little to work with. Today, the courts have a lot to work with, but you can see where this description that I just read on page 278 applies the same principles that Moses did in the very first instance. Now, another analogy, because this chapter, this lesson speaks in terms of analogy, we can look at the story of Regensburg. And during the story of Regensburg, the king found that the trial was flawed and the case should be dismissed. Now, even though in dismissing the case, they had to pay fines and a lot of other things, which we might consider quite irregular today, but the essence of that decision, the king said, this case is flawed. Why? Because the people digging the holes came in the house without supervision. their credibility was questionable. Even the evidence, which we now call forensic evidence, of whether these bones were what they claimed them to be, bones of children, or whether they were bones of an animal, or whether they were bones of anything. And the king said, this case has to be dismissed because of these reasons. Well, does this have an analogy to modern secular law? Well, it sure does. Because in modern secular law, one thing that you can't have, at least in the United States, is illegal search and seizure. They illegally entered this home, they searched it, they seized evidence. There was no warrant, there was nothing, there was no legal precedent upon which to base this. And the king, even in those days, even though the words illegal search and seizure didn't come to mind, but the principle came to mind. And then the king also said, wait a minute, there's a question as to the origin of these bones. Well, he didn't use the word forensic, that's more of a modern term, but he found, just as we discussed last week when we talk about experts, that the origin of these bones were not proven credibly by expert testimony. They were just might have been just placed there. In other words, what his finding was that we have to avoid junk science. Last week we spoke about modern cases, Fry and Daubert, which are the cases upon which courts make an analysis today to determine whether evidence is sufficiently credible and believable to be allowed to be presented to the court to decide an issue. And that is the same thing that we do today. Fry and Daubert are modern cases. One is federal, Fry is New York State. There are some slight differences between them, but the essence is the same. Reliability, not junk science. And the king then in Regensburg found the same principles. So we can see throughout the analogy from the earliest biblical times, the very first rabbi, Moses, to contemporary legal scholarly work and analysis. They all connect together. This is not random. We can trace modern law to the original Judaic biblical law. And in fact, the very last case that we looked at today was that of the hot air balloons. And what, I'm losing the page. No, here it is. How is that question presented? It was presented, wait a minute, I apologize here, by Rabbi, what's the page of the hot air balloon?
It's about 130.
Yeah. Okay, apologize. Here's how it was presented. One of the last cases we looked at today. I have been struck by a new matter that has never arisen before. A case of first impression. That's what the chapter is about. Moses was a case of first impression. The hot air balloons were a case of first impression. And we carry all of this through to modern secular law, where when a case is of first impression, we have to look towards other precedent, other dicta, other cases, anything which is what this chapter is about. Analogy. How can we analogize other things that have occurred to the present set of facts to reach a decision? So what I'm explaining is modern secular decision making, and it's based upon exactly what's in this textbook that shows the origins in the earliest biblical times.
Also,
now, let me throw out one other thing. But early in the class today, the rabbi at some point mentioned Nuremberg, the trials.
sure.
This is not directly related to, it's just a point of nice to know information. In Nuremberg, which was the prosecution of the Nazi war criminals, there was one of the chief prosecutors who was appointed was a person named Robert H. Jackson. Robert Jackson was an Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court who had been placed on the court by President Roosevelt. Robert Jackson, I'm working towards our local, where we are now. Robert Jackson also studied law for a time at Albany Law School, but he didn't finish Albany Law School. Robert Jackson was also, and I believe the last one in that era, not the last one, to become eligible to take the bar exam by reading the law without having the benefit of a law school diploma, because he read the law, sometimes called Lincoln Law, because Abraham Lincoln self-trained himself and he read the law. I don't know who the very last one of those was, but I throw this out to the public because I'm a Lincoln lawyer also.
There's not many like.
There are there are very few. In fact, I'm digressing now, but when I was admitted to practice, which was in 1975, which means I'm old, there was an article in Newsweek magazine that a friend of mine in the Army gave me, and it was entitled "Do-It-Yourself Lawyers." And according to the authority of Newsweek, whether it's right or wrong, but it's a credible magazine, they said in 1975, there were 8 of us in the country. I don't know if that's true or not, but I know one other. I know 2 others actually. But so yeah, no, it's not that common any longer. But it was very, very common back even in the days of Robert Jackson and the days of Abraham Lincoln. You didn't have law schools all over the place. So it relates back, sometimes called Lincoln Law. Not the novel that bears that name, but how he studied law. Anyway.
Yes, so that's pretty impressive.
A little bit of a digression.
So when I met Fred originally, I asked him, which law school did you go to? And he said he never went to law school. He just passed the bar in his first try.
Yeah.
Well, my friends, that's it for this week. Next week, I just want to again remind you, everyone is invited, not Monday, not next Tuesday's class. Monday, I'm giving a class at Siena. It's open to everyone. If you need any information, I'll send it out in the email. It's going to be called Doctor, Scientist, Philosopher, and Rabbi Maimonides, and it's for everyone in the community. So you're all welcome to join me at 6 o'clock, and wish everyone a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Rabbi. Very interesting.
Thank you, Sarah.